What is up, guys and gals? It's CJ here, your Vegas insider, and we're going to keep counting them down for college basketball. The season literally is right around the corner. We're about 5 days away from the start of the season, and I've only gotten from number 25 to number 20 on my preseason top 25. So we're going to count them down 3 at a time on these videos until we get to number 1. So today we're doing 19 through 17. I want to give a quick update on my last video. If you haven't seen the latest video I've done on college basketball, I previewed 22 through 20. Number 21 in that video was Washington. Now, I have some really good breaking news if you're a Washington Huskies basketball fan. I talked a lot about the starting point guard Quade Green, the 5-star transfer from Kentucky, who was actually not eligible until the second semester for this season. Well, he was just given yesterday a eligibility waiver from the NCAA. So he will hit the ground running. He will be starting from day one as the point guard for Washington. This is huge news if you're a Washington fan, because now your starting 5 has 3 5-star recruits. I wouldn't necessarily have him moved up from number 21, maybe a spot or 2, but I definitely think that they're just going to be more solid throughout the year as opposed to just being dangerous at the end. And I think they're a viable Pac-12 contender. I think Washington, Oregon, Arizona are all right there, like 1A, 1B, 1C. And then below that you have Colorado, and then maybe USC below that in 5th. But the point is, Washington could certainly win the Pac-12 regular season title for the 2nd year in a row. And it's just really good news if you're a Washington fan. So I just wanted to give that quick update. Let's go ahead and get cracking on more of these previews, and let's start with the number 19 Baylor Bears. Okay, so Baylor, they are having a tremendous season in football this year, kind of unexpected. I think they're either 8-0 or 9-0 as of right now this week. They just beat West Virginia. They're having a tremendous year under Matt Rule. And expectations are high for the basketball program as well. Scott Drew, he's consistently had Baylor playing at a high level, making the tournament year in and year out. He's made a few Sweet 16s in there. He took Baylor from a complete mess when he became the coach. I think maybe about 10 years ago, 10 or 12 years ago. Baylor was probably one of the worst teams in the Power 6. They've now become a staple in the NCAA tournament, and they're always a tough out. They're always a strong team. So kudos to Scott Drew. He's done a great job building that program there. Baylor, a lot of people are really high on Baylor this year. I'm actually not as high. This is going to be a lot like the Texas Tech preview, where I have the team ranked, but I have no desire to run out and bet them on the future line. And I just think they might be a tad overrated. I'm going to tell you why I have Texas Tech and Baylor ranked. Because I have them 2 and 3 in the Big 12. And whoever finishes 2nd and probably even 3rd in that conference is going to be a ranked team at the end of the season. The problem is, and I'll freely admit this, outside of Kansas, I have no crystal ball. I don't have a good feeling for my crystal ball on predicting the Big 12. If you draw a line underneath Kansas, Kansas is an elite team. They're a Final Four contender. They're a national title contender. I have no doubt Kansas is going to win the Big 12 this year. I just have no doubt. Barring, several major injuries, Kansas is going to be your Big 12 champ. But if you draw a line under them and go 2 through 10, you could almost put those teams in any order, and I wouldn't have any problem with it. I have Baylor as number 2 in the conference. I have Texas Tech as number 3. But if Baylor and Texas Tech finished 5th and 6th or 6th and 8th, honest to God, it wouldn't even shock me that much. Because, like I said, and I'm going to repeat a lot of what I said in the last video when talking about Texas Tech, the Big 12 has no bad teams. So even the teams that are picked near the bottom, your Iowa State, your TCUs, your Kansas State, your West Virginias, those are all good teams. And certainly at home, they could knock off Baylor or knock off Texas Tech. So while I do have Baylor ranked because I think they're talented and I have them predicted 2nd in the Big 12, I think there's a lot of variables. There's a lot of room for movement here. And I'm not comfortable enough with the current future odds to be excited about betting them. Baylor was a good rebounding team. In almost every other metric, they ranked somewhere between 100 and 200 in the country, which is nothing to get excited about. And they were a horrible free throw shooting team. Let me look the stat up for you. I have my thorough notes here. Okay, free throw percentage was 67.7. It ranked 285th in the country. There's only 353 Division I teams. It ranked 9th in the Big 12. That might not be that bad if there were 12 teams in the Big 12, but there's only 10 teams in the Big 12. It's another stupid thing that they got to fix, the NCAA, whatever. 10 teams in the Big 12 and like 36 teams in the Big 10. It's absolutely ridiculous. But regardless, they ranked 9th out of 10th in the conference in free throw shooting. When you get to the NCAA tournament, and I do believe Baylor's going to be a tournament team this year. I don't know how high the seed will be. I think the seed could fall anywhere from an 8 or a 9 like they were last year to as high as maybe a 4 or a 5. But regardless of what your seed is, you have to make free throws. You have to be a good free throw shooting team to advance in March. I've never seen a poor free throw shooting team win the national title. That'll be something I'll have to look up. I'm gonna do some research and look up every single team that's won the national title and see what the worst free throw percentage as a team is in that instance. But 67.7 is terrible, and you're gonna lose a game in March that you probably should have won because you're gonna throw up bricks at the free throw line, and the other team's gonna they're playing from behind, or maybe they hit a couple threes and end up beating you because you can't make your free throws and seal the game. So that worries me for Baylor. Also, what they lost worries me a little bit. Makai Mason was a really good lead guard. King McClure was, a staple in the backcourt there for a good 3 seasons. And they lost Mario Kegler this year. He returned, and he was going to be one of the starters, but he got suspended for disciplinary reasons, and then he just said, well, the hell with it, I'm going to leave the team and go play pro. And he's a former 5-star recruit, originally recruited by Ben Howland at Mississippi State, but he's a former 5-star, and he was a double-figure scorer for Baylor last year. So you lost 2 double-figure scorers and King McClure, who was a starter. Now, granted, Tristan Clark got hurt last year, and you got him back, so he basically replaces Mario Kegler, and they both play the same position. They're both that power forward position, but it just hurts Baylor's depth a little bit that Kegler isn't playing, and I think he would have started. I think he would have started 2 forwards, and he would have started alongside Tristan Clark, and it would have made for a pretty imposing front line. So I do think that is a significant loss for Baylor. Okay, so I just touched on the negatives that I saw, some of the cons with Baylor. Let's go ahead and talk about the pros. Pros are the one stat that they were impressive in last season was rebounding margin. Baylor is a tough, physical rebounding team. They crashed the offensive glass well. I think with Tristan Clark playing a full season, he's an excellent rebounder. So Baylor's always going to be tough on the glass. They're always going to get a lot of offensive rebounds. And the other positive that I see with this team coming into this season is the progression of Jared Butler. Jared Butler was a freshman last year. He played behind Makai Mason. He was kind of he backed up Makai at the point and then played a little off ball as well. But I think he's ready to make a big leap in his sophomore season, from freshman to sophomore season. He got a lot of good minutes, a lot of quality experience, had a good year last year. So he'll be your lead guard. And they have Maceo Teague, a transfer, coming in. He will be the backcourt mate alongside Butler. But he's a proven scorer in Division I college basketball. So you're replacing McClure and Mason with Butler and Teague, and I think that will be fine there. Butler may even have a little more athletic upside than Makai Mason had, so it may even be a slight improvement. And then you bring back Mark Vital. Vital on the wing, he'll be a 6'6" wing / small forward. He's a really good rebounder for his size and position. So he's part of what makes Baylor a good rebounding team. So you have a 6'6" wing, and then your 2 front court players, your 2 starting front court players will be 6'9". So Baylor has plenty of size, and they have a lot of depth. Baylor does have a lot of depth this season. Even with losing Kegler, this team can still go at least 9 deep, possibly 10. They do only have one true freshman coming in, and it's just because they didn't have that many scholarships available, and they didn't know they would have an extra scholarship available because Mario Kegler left the team. So the roster is filled out. The one freshman coming in is Jordan Turner. He's a forward, a 3-star, number 160 overall at 24/7. So you know there's no true freshmen who are going to come in and make a significant impact right away, but there is enough experience coming back for this team. There's enough quality minutes, and I think between Butler at the point and Tristan Clark at the power forward spot, there's a lot to like here. But also, the Big 12, like I said, it's so tough. It's such a meat grinder night in and night out. There's no easy wins in conference. And if you look at Baylor's record last year, they were only 20-14. So it wasn't an amazing season. I just think the bar was set pretty low. So the fact they made the tournament and actually won a game in the tournament was beyond a lot of people's expectations. My thing is that I think people are just overvaluing them this year. I've seen them in some preseason rankings as high as like 12, 13, 14. I just wouldn't go that high. I think where I have them at 19 is just going to be about the ceiling, and the floor could be a lot lower. So that's really it with the Baylor Bears. I don't have too much more to say about them. At 80-1, which is the highest number you can get in town, like I said, I'm just not very high on them. I think I can happily pass on this number. If somehow the odds get raised, if they lose a few games, if they struggle early in the conference, which is definitely possible with this conference, maybe I would hit them at a 200-1, 300-1 type number. But I can definitely feel good about passing on them for now, just like Texas Tech. So that's it for Baylor, and we'll move on to number 18. All right, number 18, Xavier. Okay, here we go. A team I'm high on. I'm extremely excited about this season for a lot of Big East teams. The Big East took a big step backwards last year. 2 years ago, and then 2 years before that, the Big East won the national championship with Villanova winning the title. But last year they took a big step back. I didn't think Villanova was elite last year, and they still ended up winning the conference. Marquette started out hot, but really faded down the stretch. Seton Hall was inconsistent all season. There wasn't a lot to like. Xavier was very poor at the beginning of the season, but they came on as the season progressed. And when the season ended, they were probably playing as well, if not better, than anyone else in the league. And that's kind of to be expected. The head coach is Travis Steele. It was his first season as the head man. Former head man Chris Mack packed up and went to Louisville, and we know what he's doing there. Louisville will be previewed later in my series. And he was a fantastic coach. So Travis Steele struggled a little bit, which, I don't blame him for that, with it being his first year in charge. But they really caught fire at the end of the season. They were playing very well. And they basically bring every key piece back. They have 4 returning starters who all average in double figures. And not only that, they bring in 2 solid transfers, and they have a top 25 recruiting class. The 4 returning starters, Gooden at the point, who is 8th all-time in assists at the school, at Xavier, and has a season to go. So who knows how far he'll move up that list. He's your starting point guard. You have Scruggs at the 2, Najee Marshall, who is going to end up being one of the best players in the conference this year. He's your 6'6" athletic wing type. And then you have Jason Carter, the Ohio U transfer, who averaged just shy of 16.5 points. He averaged 16.5 points and 7 rebounds at Ohio. He'll play the 4. And then you have Tyreek Jones at the 5, your big bruiser, power forward / center type. And the whole team, or the nucleus of the team, the main parts of the team, are all seniors and juniors, which you have to love. So it's a team that has a ton of experience. They've been playing together for a long time. And now they have depth coming in. They have 4 recruits coming in who rank anywhere from number 87 to number 150 at 24/7. So all 4 of those guys could see minutes. And then I want to talk about another key transfer they have, Bryce Moore. Bryce Moore was another transfer from the MAC, just like Jason Carter. He came from the same conference. He sat last year, and which I think will really help because now he has a whole year being at the school, learning under Travis Steele, learning the system, and he fills what will be Xavier's biggest void this season. Xavier really struggled in two areas last year. Free throw shooting, just like Baylor, the last team I just talked about. Xavier was also a poor free throw shooting team, and they were a poor three-point shooting team. Xavier, from three-point field goals last year, 33.1%. It ranked 244th in the country and 8th in the Big East. So not good. There's only, I believe there's 10 teams in the Big East. So they ranked 8th out of 10. But Bryce Moore was a 39% three-point shooter 2 years ago in the MAC. So now he had another year. He had his transfer season to work on his game, develop. And now he's another senior, and he'll be the main three-point shooter for this team. If you look at Xavier's starting five, and then you look at Bryce Moore, who I think he'll be the sixth man. He'll be your instant offense, stretch the defense when you need, somebody to shoot it from long range. You're looking at 3 seniors and 3 juniors out of those top 6. So that's a ton of experience. It's a ton of maturity, and I think the ceiling is very high for Xavier this year. And also the coach, Travis Steele, going from his first full season to now his second year in charge with his system in place. Now he knows his players, and he even knows Bryce Moore well, even though he didn't play last year. But like I said, he's been on campus for a year now. So I'm very excited and very high on Xavier. Let's dive into last year's stats really quick. And it is important since most of the roster is returning from last season. Xavier was a lot like Baylor last year in that they weren't particularly good in any statistical category. And the thing they were best at, like Baylor, is rebounding. Their rebounding margin last season was plus 4.6, which ranked 40th in the country, 2nd in the Big East. So that was impressive. And like Baylor, they struggled from the free throw line. They struggled from the three-point line. They were better in terms of assists per game than Baylor. Their turnovers were about the same. Xavier turned it over a little too much for my taste. They turned it over 13.3 times per game last season, which ranked 206th in the country, 6th in the Big East. But with Quentin Gooden being there, I think this is going to be his 3rd year starting at the point. And even his freshman year, he played. I believe, I'm almost certain he played a lot his freshman year. This will be his 3rd year starting. So I think he can get that number down. And like I said, they struggled so much at the beginning of the year and played so much better at the end of the year. I think if you took these stats from the middle of January on or the end of January on, they would look much more impressive. And I think that's what you're going to see this season. But the assists per game were pretty strong. Even though they turned it over too much, they did average 14.8 assists per game, which is pretty good. That ranks 64th in the country and 3rd in the Big East. So I like that. I think the assist to turnover ratio will be even better this year, which just makes Xavier that much stronger. The rebounding's there. Free throw shooting will need to be improved, just like Baylor. 67.9. It ranked 279th and dead last in the Big East. That is an area of concern when Xavier makes the tournament. And Xavier will be in the NCAA tournament this season. I know they missed it last year. They're going to be in part of March Madness this year. So the free throw shooting will worry me unless they can clean that up. That is definitely a point of concern. But other than that, I think the three-point shooting will be fine with the fact 4 starters return and you're adding Bryce Moore. I think you'll be improved there. I think you'll be improved on the assist to turnovers. I think the rebounding will be improved because your main rebounders are Marshall and Tyreek Jones, and they're both back. And Jason Carter, the incoming transfer from Ohio, he's going to grab you 6 or 7 boards a game. So I think they could be the best rebounding team in the Big East, although Seton Hall is very big. I think Seton Hall will be a very good rebounding team as well. But Xavier might be the best. We'll have to see. But my point is they're going to be improved in every category across the board. And they can't be any worse at free throw shooting. They can only get better. So if they can improve that free throw shooting number from 67.7 to, say, if they could just improve it to like 71%, this team is going to be a lot better and win a lot more games. And they won 19 last year. I think they can easily step that win total up to 23 or 24 or more this year. So I am high on Xavier. Here's the future I like. 100 to 1, and I've seen it at a couple of places. I believe MGM had 100 to 1. I think Circa has 100 to 1, and someone else had 100 to 1. It might be the Westgate or someone. That is the highest, but I would play this because I think Xavier's going to be a top 3 team in the Big East, just like Washington. In the Pac-12, you have Washington, Oregon, Arizona. You could pick any of those 3, could be 1 to 3. I kind of list them 1A, 1B, 1C. They're all very equal. Same thing in the Big East. I think between Villanova, Xavier, and Seton Hall, it's all kind of 1A, 1B, 1C, and any one of those teams could win the conference. If you're gonna make me pick, I have Xavier 3rd, but it would not shock me at all if they won the conference. I think they're good enough to, and I think they should absolutely have that as their goal this season. Okay, so we have 2 down, 1 to go on this video. Just to recap, I'm high on Xavier. I'm fading Baylor. Let's go ahead and go to our number 17 and final team in this video, the Utah State Aggies. As much as I like Xavier, I definitely saved the best or my favorite for last in this video. I can't even begin to say how high I am on this Utah State team. Now, granted, I know they're in the Mountain West. They're a mid-major league compared to what Baylor plays in, what Xavier plays in. But man, when I dove to research this team, and of course, I watch games every day of the season. I was impressed watching them last season on tape, but I was really much more impressed when I dove into the numbers and dove into the stats on this team. It's unbelievable to me what Craig Smith did in one season, just how Travis Steele has only been at Xavier 1 year. Craig Smith has only been at Utah State 1 year. He came from South Dakota and the Summit League on over to Utah State and the Mountain West, and what a grab for Utah State. He should have been the coach of the year last year, in my opinion. You're talking about a team that was picked 8th in the Mountain West, going up against a juggernaut in Nevada. And if you're just a casual college basketball fan, or if you kind of forget what Nevada was going into last season, Nevada was a top 5 team in the preseason last year. And although they didn't reach those lofty expectations, Nevada was still pretty good. They made the tournament as a 7 seed. One of the reasons they didn't make the tournament with a higher seed than a 7 is because they didn't win the Mountain West Conference because Utah State was so good. Utah State was predicted 8th in the Mountain West. They tied for the regular season Mountain West title and then won the Mountain West tournament. So in my opinion, they should have had a higher seed than Nevada. As it worked out, Nevada was a 7, Utah State was an 8. Close enough. But my point is, it's phenomenal what Craig Smith did. And now if you look at what they have this year, you would think they should take even a bigger leap forward this year, because just about every key piece returns, and now your coach is there for a 2nd season, and now he's bringing in some top-level JC transfers and some big freshman recruits coming in on campus. So real quick, something there's a lot of things that stand out to me about this Utah State team, but some things that I think are very important to note. Utah State is one of the biggest teams in the country this season. I'm not sure if you're aware, but size matters. Size matters in a few things in life. It definitely matters in basketball. This team just has a ton of size at every position, a ton of size, a ton of depth, and if Neemias Queta is fully healthy, this is a team that can make a Final Four. I know a lot of people are high on Utah State and everybody has them ranked, so I'm not going out on a limb having them at 17th, but I'm saying this could be a real Final Four sleeper this year. Utah State has never had higher than a number 8 seed in the NCAA tournament. That was last year. They played Washington, who was a 9. And even though it looks on the score sheet like they got killed, the game was close with about 6 minutes left, and then Utah State just couldn't make a shot, and Washington ran away from them. But my point is now Utah State has some tournament experience. They get all the key pieces back. They bring in lots of new key pieces. Guys who were injured last season, who had to sit and watch last season, who are now going to be playing. They have a coach now in his second year. I am super high on this Utah State team. And like I've said in other videos, mid-majors is where you find all the future value. So with Utah State, I'm seeing 150 to 1, 200 to 1. I've even seen 250 to 1 on this team right now on the future line. That's all throughout town. You could find high odds on them. And that, even though I have them ranked higher than Baylor, higher than Washington, higher than Texas Tech, higher than Houston, the odds, you get better odds to bet them because they're a mid-major. I think there's a ton of value. If you're going around town, if you're in Vegas and you see 150 to 1 or 200 to 1 on this team, I think you should absolutely lay down some jaw on the Aggies. I think Utah State is clearly the best team in the Mountain West. I think San Diego State will be improved, and New Mexico will be improved, and certainly Boise State. Boise State's going to be much improved. So if the entire conference may be improved outside of Nevada, Nevada's definitely going to take a step back. But if the rest of the conference, top to bottom, is improved like I think it will be, that will only help them as far as earning a higher seed in March. But I think Utah State can absolutely be a 5 seed or higher as opposed to the 8 they were last year. And they play some good non-conference games. Let's talk about the non-conference schedule really quick, since that is very important for a mid-major team. Utah State plays in the non-con UTSA, LSU, St. Mary's, BYU, South Florida, and Florida. That is a tremendous non-conference schedule. So with Florida, LSU, St. Mary's, those are quad 1 win opportunities right there. And it's possible BYU and South Florida can also be very good wins. And I would expect UTSA to be one of the better mid-major teams in the country this year as well. And then you get 2 games against San Diego State in conference. You get to play New Mexico, and you get to play Boise State, who I think will be a pretty decent team as well. So there's plenty of opportunity for good wins and to build a good resume. And if Utah State beats all the lower tier teams in the Mountain West like they should, I would think a record like 28-5 or better is absolutely attainable for the squad. I think you could see Utah State with a 29-4 type record, and that's assuming they lose to Florida and either, say, LSU or St. Mary's. If they lose those 2, I don't see them losing more than 2 games in the Mountain West. Maybe they lose at San Diego State, maybe they lose at New Mexico. But outside of that, they should win all their other Mountain West games. And so I think you can look at 29-4 or possibly even better if they could take down LSU and St. Mary's, which wouldn't shock me by any means. There's a lot to look forward this year with Utah State. And if they have that kind of a record, now you're talking possibly a 3 seed in the tournament. I think it can happen. Let me throw out these numbers from last season. Utah State's scoring offense, 78.6 points per game. That ranked 43rd in the country, 2nd in the conference. But their scoring defense was 67.1. That was 58th in the country, also 2nd in the conference. Usually when you're good on one side of the ball, like you're a very high-level scoring team or you're a very good defensive team, it means that your rank on the opposite end of the floor is usually pretty low. Like, I'll give you an example. A team like St. Mary's, who plays at a very defined and slow pace, they're going to be they're probably going to lead the West Coast Conference in scoring defense every single year, but they're not going to be one of the better teams in the conference in scoring offense because they limit possessions. They play so few possessions. Same thing for like a Virginia, right? Virginia's going to be number 1 in the ACC in scoring defense, but in scoring offense, they might only rank like 5th or 6th, right? Well, Utah State ranks 2nd in both. And that tells me that they can play any style of play. They can play a slower pace, they can play a faster pace. By scoring 78.6 points per game, they can speed it up if they need to. But by allowing only 67.1, they can grind you down on the defensive end if need be. So that really impressed me. Their scoring margin of plus 11.5 was one of the better margins in the country. And then I can just rattle off stats that just impressed me left and right. Field goal percentage, 47%. That was 2nd in the conference, 47th in the country. But their field goal percentage defense at 39.3% was 10th in the nation and 1st in the conference. 3-point shooting, 35.5. It was 4th in the conference. So, you know, not elite, but good. Good. I mean, they don't have a weakness anywhere. Free throw shooting, 74.8%, 1st in the conference last year. Rebound margin, 8.8, plus 8.8 rebounds per game. That was 6th in the nation and 1st in the conference. Assists per game, 17.1, 9th in the nation, 1st in the conference. And turnovers per game was 12.8, which was a very average rank. 12.8 turnovers was 159th in the nation out of 353, 6th in the Mountain West. So that was very average. So what these numbers show you is that Utah State doesn't have any glaring weaknesses on the team. Like we talked about with Baylor and Xavier. They were very bad free throw shooting teams and pretty bad from 3-point distance. Utah State was pretty good at everything. Their biggest weakness was the turnovers per game at 12.8 because it ranked 159th. But their assist to turnover ratio was still really good. If you're getting 17 assists and 12 to 13 turnovers, you're fine. Your assist to turnover as a team, like if a Florida State could put up those assist to turnover ratios, they'd probably be in the Final Four every year. So there's not a problem I see there. And then also another thing on those turnover numbers, their starting point guard, Abel Porter, he only took over midway through the season as the starting point guard last year. And from that time, they only lost 1 game all season. I think with Abel Porter as the starting point guard, they were, I think it was like 17-1 or 18-1 until they lost in the tournament to Washington. So the assist to turnovers should improve, should even get better this year now that Abel Porter has almost a full season starting under his belt. All I can say about this team is the more I look at them, the more I like them. And with all the size they have coming in, with the JUCO transfers that are ready to play, with the freshmen who I think can get some minutes and give them some depth, with 4 returning starters, and a point guard who, you know, now they have an established point guard. And I haven't even talked about Sam Merrill. I did all this Utah State preview gloating about how good they're going to be, and I didn't even talk about their best player. Their actual best player, like Keita might be the most important player because of what he represents on both ends of the floor and just his physical presence. But the best player on the team is Sam Merrill. He's your 2 guard. He's a senior 6'5" shooting guard who averaged 21 points a game last season and was the conference player of the year. And he's coming back. One thing I love about this lineup and this roster is Craig Smith has so much flexibility he can use. If he wants to play 4 out around Keita, if Keita's 100% and he wants to use him like Virginia Tech used Kerry Blackshear last season. If you watch Virginia Tech the last few seasons, they would play four guards around 1 paint player. Utah State can do that. They could, instead of Justin Bean at the forward, you could put Diago Brito in this spot, and you could play 4 around Keita and spread the floor. If you want to go extra big, instead of having Bean at the 4, you could play Clay Stahl at power forward and Keita at center. Then you're going 6'10", 6'11", and play the 3-guard lineup. I mean, it's even possible you could put Karwowski at center at 7'2", and play Kita at the power forward at 6'11". Now you have twin towers underneath the basket. It's a good problem to have. It's a good problem to have, not knowing what your optimal lineup is, because there's so many ways they could go, and there's so much flexibility with this lineup that I can't wait to see Utah State play and see how Coach Smith uses his lineups. But the bottom line is, I'm thrilled to have futures on this team at 200 to 1, 250 to 1. I actually got one at 500 to 1 right after the season ended last year. Cantor put up 500 to 1 on Utah State. I bet it once, and they immediately dropped it. I think they realized that they had made a mistake and just had them way too high. But I'm telling you, to me, this is a second weekend team. This is a dark horse, Elite Eight, Final Four type team. We'll just, hopefully everybody will be healthy come March. Hopefully Kita's 100%. And if you're a fan of basketball in Logan, Utah, you have a lot to be excited about this season. I hope you got something out of this video if you're a college basketball fan, or if you're a person who likes to wager a little bit. Hopefully this video can help make you some money as well. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I do college basketball and college football videos throughout the year. Also, go ahead and share this with anybody who likes maybe putting a little money on a team here and there, trying to make some money. I'm very big on Utah State. I think the futures on them represent a lot of value. I'm a little cold on Baylor at 80 to 1. I think you can lay off of them. I think you can lay off of every Big 12 team outside of Kansas right now and just wait for the season to play out and see where teams find their position within the Big 12. I am high on Xavier. That 100 to 1 on Xavier, I think, represents value. And like I talked about at the beginning of the video, I'm high on Washington right away now. Go back and watch the video I made 2 days ago, the Washington video where I talk about Quade Green. He is now the starter all season. So Washington, like I said, they have 3 5-star recruits in their starting 5. So I am very high on them at 100 to 1 now as well. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow with the next preview.